I think there's a lot of good in the traditional values of what he's talking about.
Yeah.
But even that stuff gets old. That gets old too sometimes.
Okay. So you're
like, what I'm saying is that there's like, it's not like all progressive materialism is bad. It's that we overconsume and we don't know where to draw the line. And part of the evolutionary process is us like figuring out and being like, oh, we can't spend 8 hours a day looking at our phone. That will kill us. And make us sad and depressed.
Yeah. It's a balance.
So we're like learning that. We're like literally in the midst of that. All right, Stay Spiritual team, James and Justin back again. We took a little bit of time off there, had a nice little relaxing vacation there for the week this summer. But now we're back and we're going to do a reaction on a video done by the Muslim Skeptic entitled The Genius of Islam. And it's like separated into 3 parts. And this first part is called The Modern Human Condition.
Okay.
So we're going to get into it, unpack it. If you guys want to see us do reactions on the other 2 following videos, let us know in the comments. Make sure to smash the like, hit the bell so you know when we're releasing new videos and all that stuff. But with all that said, let's get into it.
Ladies and gentlemen, we may be approaching a fateful hour. D-Day is here. The invasion has begun.
First, some context. Science fiction portrays 3 visions of the future of humanity. First, there's the dystopian future where all of mankind is enslaved as the human spirit is crushed under the weight of a totalitarian regime that reduces human beings to mere cogs in a massive technocratic wasteland.
Where we
Second,
are now.
There's the equally dystopian future where humanity is also enslaved, but authorities use mass media in tandem with powerful pharmaceuticals to dope the masses into seeing their condition as one of freedom, pleasure, and bliss. Then there's a third vision of the future, perhaps the most terrifying, where the human race no longer exists because technology has finally made the human body and even the human mind obsolete. Instead of men and women, the world is populated with robots, androids, and disembodied cyberhumans. Our current reality in the modern world is the realization of not 1 or 2 of these dystopian futures, but all 3. We're told that current year might not be perfect, but it's far better than any other time in human history. This is because humanity is constantly progressing. Constant economic growth, constant technological advancement, constant moral progress as humanity discovers new human rights and new freedoms to be championed in the latest social justice campaigns. Humans are better off now than they were at any time in history, or so we're told. But what is the reality? Think about the modern person's life. From the moment he's born to the moment he dies, modern man finds himself institutionalized. He's born in an institution run by the state, the hospital. The instant he comes into the world, he's grabbed by the medical professionals and weighed and measured and injected. After a day or 2, he might get to leave that institution, but guess what? His mother is a strong, independent woman who has to work at a soulless job to make ends meet. Statistically, it's most likely that she's a single mother and doesn't have a husband or committed family to help with a new baby. So the baby has to go to daycare, another institution, for most of the day, surrounded by more professionals. At age 4, he's transferred to yet another institution, grade school, where more professionals make sure he's properly educated. 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, he's fed the state-mandated curriculum, ensuring that he becomes an obedient citizen, an obedient consumer. He gets older and goes to college, another institution meant to train him to be a productive citizen who thinks the right thoughts, believes the right beliefs. After graduation, he can look forward to desperately searching for a job to pay back tens of thousands of dollars in student debt. If he can't find a job in his field of study, he can always find menial labor for minimum wage. If he's lucky, he might hit the jackpot, working as a wage slave plugged into the corporate rat race. Every day he drags himself out of bed, sits behind the computer for 40 hours a week, comes home exhausted, too tired and emotionally burnt out to do anything other than order takeout and watch Netflix. Maybe he gets married, maybe has 1 or 2 kids, but really, what's the point? They're all locked into their own institutional existence for most waking hours of their atomized lives. So he works like this. He works like this for 40 years, only to retire. Most likely he's divorced by...
Oh my God. What a nightmare. What a
dystopian future.
daymare. What an actual mare that's happening right now, mare.
Yeah. It's not a future. It's a lot of what he's saying. Yeah, it's very evident. It's like outside of the robots taking over.
Yeah.
What he's talking about here, sure resonates with a lot of people.
I do think that some of that stuff is a little bit generational, though. I feel like if you were to ask people, 20 years our senior, they would be like, you just do what you gotta do, man. You do what you gotta do.
Yeah.
I feel like the younger generations are like, they do feel like that. They're like, this is a nightmare. I'm not dragging my ass home after a day of crunching numbers. And, I do feel like that. I would imagine a lot of kind of people in the workforce field these days.
I also think it's up for debate too, right? Like he paints a pretty bleak picture, and I rag on our system all the time. But I always say at the end of the day, though, I still think that we're living in the best time ever. What other time would you choose to go back to that you think would be better?
Yeah.
What other time are you going back to?
Yes.
Oh, the one that doesn't have medication for you, or penicillin?
Yeah.
Which
or
was
any
only 100
opportunities
years ago?
Or any opportunities because they control all the information. Yeah. You damn right. So it is kind of like that. It's never been so, you've never been so free to exploit people, but you've also never been so free to get yourself ahead in the matrix.
Yes.
And then,
So
it's
tough.
But I do agree with a lot of what he's saying. I agree with the attitude behind, let's at least face how we feel. Is that how a lot of us feel? That we're dragging our ass to a job we don't really want and all that shit?
Yeah.
Is that or is that not how we feel? And if he's identifying that correctly, that's something.
Yeah.
What you said is also correct. And it is funny. I guess you could show the thing where it was like a future inhabited by robots. You could show them being like, yay! You know what I mean? Like frolicking.
Helping everyone.
Like all the evil humans are gone. F that. Remember being a half monkey, half human? Being organic matter that suffered all the time? Yeah. But nevertheless, I am captivated.
Yeah.
Let's continue.
I'm curious to see where this goes because I haven't seen... This is as far as I've seen.
By then, his kids have long ago moved on. He has to spend the end of his life alone, maybe in a nursing home, the final institution. So from birth until death, virtually every moment of his life was mediated by a state or corporate institution. Or maybe he will end up living alone, and when he dies in his apartment, no one will really know. He has no family to visit him or care for him, and when he dies, it'll only become apparent a few months later when the growing stench of his rotting corpse wafts into the halls of his apartment building. And then again, a corporation has to be called
kind of a nice apartment,
to dispose of the putrid remains.
Change over. Next section.
This sad existence is not unusual. It's in fact the norm. It's the model. It's by design, the logical consequence of a materialist, progressive worldview. After all, real happiness, according to materialists, is not to be found in some promised heaven in an imagined afterlife. This life is all we have, and material bodies are all that exist. As such, the meaning of life is really about maximizing bodily delights and reducing pain and toil. And the best way, indeed the only way, to maximize pleasure and minimize toil according to this philosophy is through goods and services. Give people more food, more entertainment, more gadgets, produce more technology and more automation, which will make life more convenient. More. The more goods and services people have, the happier they'll be, the freer they'll be. One year you have basic cars, the next year cars become more advanced with power steering, and the next year they're even more advanced with airbags and Bluetooth and GPS, and so on until you have self-driving cars, and on and on. Products become better and more plentiful. This is progress. The classical liberal thinkers and the early economists, people like John Locke, John Stuart Mill, Jeremy Bentham, and Adam Smith, they're all progressivists. They all agreed that human happiness was tied to more goods and services, and more goods and services would eventually bring human freedom, equality, and ultimately utopia. Communist thinkers were no different. In fact, communism as a materialist philosophy fully agrees that human happiness and freedom can only come from more and more goods and services.
Before he gets to the true answer here, what do you think so far? Goods and services, these ideas.
Again, I like to try to find the middle ground. I like to see where I can get some balance in here because, materialism. I agree, it can become a major problem. And where do you draw the line? Where do you stop with it? And overconsumption has led to many of the environmental problems we have today, many of the social problems we have today, with everyone being lost in gadgets.
But what happens? Are they going to find us and end us if we reveal the secret to save yourself from that hell? The hell of thinking that you can fill the void with that shit. It's just brain chemistry.
Yeah.
It's all dopamine. First of all, as a human being, you're incredibly exploitable. They're like, I know you're lonely and scared and empty.
Yeah.
But the thing is, when you live for pleasure, your dopamine spikes and then it goes below baseline. And then it won't even get to baseline. And then you're depressed. And then you go to the doctors or a therapist and then they give you a bunch of tricks and whistles and shit to deal with it.
Yeah.
You actually want to have more naturally occurring dopamine, lean into harder things. A lot of you're going to stabilize yourself a little bit if you start setting difficult goals incrementally. You know what I mean? You'll be like, it feels good to improve myself. Not as tasty and salty and delicious as a burger or heroin. Yeah. But it feels good. And then it's like a slower, mellower, more peaceful, more constructive approach, But we're so exploitable. We see bright colors. If I pass a sign for a Big Mac, I'm like, oh God, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I need a Big Mac. You know what I mean? But it's like trying to not expose yourself to all that stuff that manipulates you. And you're right, it's in your phone, it's everywhere, and it's just playing on your brain chemistry, getting you locked into choosing stupid stuff. I want to hear what this guy has to say.
Yeah, sure.
As a remedy or whatever.
The communist only disagrees with his liberal counterpart on how best to achieve and distribute those goods and services, but the underlying materialism is the same. Does non-stop consumption lead to freedom and happiness?
No.
Sure, some aspects of happiness can be put in consumer terms like food, shelter, the basic needs of life, but most human happiness doesn't depend on products. The happiness that comes from a loving and committed relationship with the opposite sex, the happiness that comes from growing old with a loving family and devoted children, the happiness that comes from sharing an identity with other human beings centered around pursuit of a higher purpose.
But why do those things satisfy more than doing drugs alone in a basement? Or why do they satisfy more than eating a burger behind a grocery store like a rat?
Yeah. But even those, to me, it sounds like he's making a case for conservative traditionalism.
But the reason it makes sense, the reason why it would be more fulfilling for you to find a life partner and have babies and be part of a community and all that stuff is actually because of your genetics. Is actually because you are a human at the end of the day. It's like, how do humans behave? Well, they kind of get together with other humans and talk and connect with them and have sex and breed. Yeah. You know, these things are like, they're playing on your they're real because you're a human. You're not a cyborg yet. Yeah. So that's why they're more fulfilling. But they also know that your survival drive is like very hackable. It's like, you know, you get a taste of salt or something that's pleasure or comfort creating. Yeah. That's also tied into your survival. You know?
But again, I hear what he's saying, and
I'm not arguing with him.
I think there's a lot of good in the traditional values of what he's talking about. Yeah. But even that stuff gets old. That gets old too sometimes.
Okay. So you're
like, what I'm saying is that there's like, it's not like all progressive materialism is bad. It's that we overconsume and we don't know where to draw the line. And part of the evolutionary process is us like figuring out and being like, oh, we can't spend 8 hours a day looking at our phone. That will kill us.
Yes.
And make us sad and depressed.
Yeah. It's a balance.
So we're like learning that. We're like literally in the midst of that.
I agree. And that's why I'm trying to learn to not judge too hard when people become like hyper vain with their, you know, like, you know what I mean? Like, it didn't really happen if you didn't get the Instagram. You know, I'm trying not to judge that because that's actually we're going through a phase right now.
That's only for a generation. I bet you our kids won't even do that. They'll be like, ew, people take selfies? Come on, Dad.
If people from like the 50s could see what we're up to, they'd probably be like, oh! They'd probably be horrified. Yeah. Just like we might be horrified. Like, what if we looked 50 years into the future and everyone's like silent? Yeah. And we might be like, this looks depressing. What happened to partying and eating burgers and shakes and, you know? Yeah. Who knows? Who knows what the future holds? Yeah. But I do kind of think that we're in a bit of a phase right now. We're like, you know, pretty late stage capitalism here in the West. Yeah.
Profound sources of happiness are not, in terms of bodily pleasures, they're not consumerist in nature, and in fact, the consumer economy does a great deal to dissolve these organic relationships and replace them with alternatives. Why bother with the duties of marriage when you can use a convenient sex app or online pornography to perpetually satisfy carnal lusts? Why bother with the burden of having to raise your children yourself when daycare services make it so easy to ship them off while you pursue your personal career ambitions? Why bother with the burden of serving God and uniting with the community of the faithful when you can wallow in the faux feel-good mixed spirituality offered by flashy motivational speakers whose cloying adjurations are broadcast directly via social media to the palm of your hand? It's the intrusiveness of consumer technology that has created a modern society that is more atomized, more individualistic, and ultimately more depressed, more lonely, more unhappy, more disconnected from everything that makes life worth living. The human mind naturally shuns such an artificial existence. The only way modern people survive is by constant use of drugs, alcohol, painkillers, and antidepressants to numb the senses. And still, suicide rates and drug overdose deaths have been climbing year after year. Modern unhappiness is truly unique. Perhaps most telling is what's called the happiness income paradox. Contrary to the materialists, happiness doesn't increase when income increases. When the happiness levels and income levels in dozens of countries around the world are tracked over a long period of time, it becomes evident that more material wealth does not equal more happiness. But other studies paint a darker picture.
I have a kind of a little theory coming into my mind right now. It's speaking to me now. Maybe that's because there's so many different ways of becoming wealthy now. You hear about these young guys that are like, oh, so fucking easy to make wealth. You know what I mean? I just like, I did that thing where you go in they're smarter than me, by the way. They're like, I can't believe you haven't even made $1 million yet. You know, they'll like find some tricky internet way to sell something or do something and become a millionaire. Yeah. But I think there was a time when being a millionaire like gave you more status or something than it does now. Because it seems like it's not. There is a bump that I think you get when your like status as a human raises, or when you're like your power as a human raises. When people depend on you, and when you are calling the shots, remember you're like kind of an ape. And that does something for your like self-identity and your self-esteem. And I do think that has the potential to like trigger some chemicals in your brain.
There's a whole other element too that I think is being forgotten in this. And again, this goes back to kind of like the evolutionary process of things, is that the more affluent you become, the more time you have to start thinking. And there's a lot of time there in human history, probably even just go back 100 years, where your life was just geared around pure survival. You were just surviving.
But hang on.
But one second. I'm sure there's been philosophers and stuff like that and affluent people, but not very many. Not as many as there are today. People who have time to just sit at home and think and read and have fun all day.
Yeah, but there's a difference between getting so financially independent that you can go somewhere around some wise people that give you some methods to like introspect, go in deep, do some healing and stuff like that. There's a difference between that and, you know, I sold a bunch of cryptocurrency and now I just like, you know, I bought these girls and I'm just gonna like party and do till you are like sitting on a throne, just, you know, full of drugs, full of pleasure, thinking and like, you know, going insane. There's a difference between that and somebody that builds an empire and is like taking care of people. And every day people come to them and they're like, Don Corleone, thank you. You saved our company, our town or something. You know what I mean? Like there's different ways of accumulating wealth. There's different ways of growing. There's different ways of like becoming statusful and powerful and rich. Yeah. You know, like I said, I think there's a lot of bullshit ways of probably getting money these days. Like, have you ever seen that video with a kid that's like a streamer? And he's like, I hate my life. I'm so alone. I don't want to play these games anymore. You know, and there's probably a bunch of people that think, oh, I would love to just stream playing video games all day. Would you, though? Living like a Nosferatu, a vampire in a cave, playing video games, no vitamin D, you know? It might feel better to like go climb a mountain. It might feel better to save a town with your millions. It might feel better to do some of those things.
Yeah,
they're a little challenginger. They're not as tantalizing. You're not going to go on your phone and, you know, I don't know. I guess it depends on how the algorithm switches you. You know, for some people the algorithm's taking them to hell, and for some people it's like redirecting them towards Jocko Wilkins or something like that. You know, somebody going to make them try a little harder.
Yeah.
Once basic needs are met, a person's happiness is strongly correlated with perceived social rank and relative status. In other words, how rich are you compared to other people? Research shows that relative wealth and comparative status play a dominant role in people's happiness levels. This is why a millionaire, despite all his wealth, can still be very unhappy if his social circle is filled with billionaires. And why a billionaire can feel very unhappy if his social circle is filled with mega billionaires. The paradox here is that a person can endlessly increase his wealth. But if those around him are increasing their wealth at a faster rate, then he'll eventually become less happy over time. This phenomenon is referred to as the relative income hypothesis. What researchers have found is that it's a part of human nature that people who have higher status than those around them naturally feel more confident, have higher self.
Why? Why? The answer is found in a book called Our Inner Ape, which I've referenced many times. Because you are kind of like an ape. You know, we're very similar to them, and they're completely status obsessed. They're fucking. Why can't people admit it? You know what I mean? That it's like obviously it's a thing. You know, they're discussing it here, but it is real. And what do we do about that? How do we admit? Does anyone get together and be like, I'm just here to see if I can outdo you? Yeah. So am I. Hey, how's it going, Mike? I'm really going to try to dominate you in passive aggressive ways tonight. Just like growling at each other, smiling, you know?
Well, some people, I think there are some wealthy people who get to the top of that mountain, and like that Jim Carrey video we watched, right, where they realize, oh, like it's it's a charade, it's a game,
Yeah.
and they realize it. Hopefully,
Now we're getting into that monkey transcendence, though.
Yeah.
Like I do think, say you claw your way to the top, and you realize like, oh, I'm just like beating off invaders daily to stay at the tops.
Yeah.
I do think that you could get to a point where you're like, even this is empty. I've achieved everything. It's empty.
Yeah.
And now I think you're talking about like a new kind of human, probably the thing that's going to lead us to whatever's post this.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Self-esteem and are more happy. This is even seen in the animal kingdom. By contrast, those with lower social status have higher levels of depression, stress, paranoia, and mental illness. This has huge implications for how we understand the connection between happiness and the economy. If people's happiness is so closely tied to relative status, then a constantly growing modern economy is much more a source of despair than it is of happiness. Just consider the reality of the ever-burgeoning wealth gap, where 1% of the world's people own 50% of the world's wealth. The gap between the rich and the poor is absolutely unprecedented in modern times. And due to the relative income hypothesis, this also means that the levels of unhappiness and depression are also unprecedented. And the salt in the proverbial wound is that media technologies like TV and social media display the lives of the rich and famous in agonizing detail, which only heightens the sense of relative privation in the minds of the 99%, leading to dissatisfaction and depression on a global scale. Consider this paradox. People in developing countries have actually become wealthier in absolute terms over the past century, but despite the increased wealth, their overall happiness has decreased. How can that be? This is because they experience themselves as poor. Why? Because relative to Western economic growth over the same century, they're poorer in comparison. For example, colonialism and capitalism have without a doubt made the Muslim world and the developing world wealthier in material terms than it's ever been. But overall, people in the developing world, in all these countries, feel poorer and feel less happy. Why? Because in the past, their wealth was relatively equal to Europe or even higher. But even though they have more absolute wealth now than they did in the past, their relative position compared to the West has dropped. Due to colonialism and other factors, the West grew richer at a far greater pace, creating an insurmountable wealth gap. This global inequality generates a lot of unhappiness, paranoia, and depression for poor nations.
Also builds up probably a lot of anger and spite towards watching one nation thrive while others not.
Yeah, it's horrible. It's horrible. And all of this is exacerbated by kind of where we're at right now, because some people depend on this mindset, this income paradox, disparity, whatever the word is, where, it's like some people exploit that, and they get you to do things. They get you to go into certain industries or buy things based on knowing that you will feel sad in comparison to someone else.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I just wanted to point out too that, there have been people in my life that I've feel like I've had to cut off because they, I'd be like trying to seek the truth like a fellow human,
yeah.
And they'd be like, what are you going to argue with how things are? And I'm like, all right, you're dangerous to me. And then I've met people that will go through it with you. They'll be like, listen, let me try to help you catch up, or, as long as you're reciprocal to a degree,
yeah.
like, let me try to help you, you try to help me. There's good people out there. We are still humans, and we remember at the end of the day that we care about each other, and and that reality can be kind of mystical at times, and it feels like there's consequences to just being evil.
You know what? Maybe part of that depression that he's talking about, maybe we're not even conscious of it. But it's hard to thrive as a nation, like in lavish opulence, when that the person on the other side of the fence is starving to death. You know that they're there. And in a world that's getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and it's becoming more apparent, and we're able to see it more through our technologies that we've created windows. Before, you used to be able to hide behind that poverty and just be like, oh, it's so far away, it's nowhere near me. Now it's, down the street in a tent.
Oh yeah, they're some places. Oh yeah.
And so it's getting harder and harder. You can't enjoy what you have when when the people around you are starving.
Well, some people can. Some people can enjoy what they have. I think that think about it. If you are naturally, if God made you a psychopath, what are you going to not use that to your advantage? They can't even help, some people don't feel empathy as much as others. Yes, for those that have strong empathy, I'm sure that they're like, I got to get out of here. I got to do something. It's probably going to taint their enjoyment of their success. But not everybody. There's some pretty cutthroat people. And I'm not even sure that I would be, would you just, it's not like you're not already aware of certain things. You do what you can. Anyway.
Yeah.
And by the same token, it generates a lot of happiness and satisfaction for richer nations who feel good about being above others. But is the wealth gap between richer and poorer nations really insurmountable? Can't developing nations eventually catch up to the West and enjoy equal wealth and status? Doesn't a capitalist global economy provide a fair playing field for all? The answer is a resounding no. What theorists like Immanuel Wallerstein and Thomas Piketty have pointed out is that the liberal capitalist model does not account for structural inequality. The reason that 1% of the population owns 50% of the world's wealth in an ever-growing wealth gap is not due to sheer hard work and perseverance. The reason that Western nations have had overwhelmingly more wealth and held overwhelmingly more control over the rest of the world for the past few centuries is not due to sheer ingenuity. Rather, there's a clear structural inequality hardwired into global capitalism that prevents other countries from being able to catch up with the West. Sociologist Immanuel Wallerstein points to the fact that because the technological revolution began in the West, they were able to accumulate a great deal of capital. Using this capital, they were able to invest more into research and development, R&D, more so than other nations, which led to more innovation, better products, more high-tech products. Other nations couldn't compete with this, and so they were locked into a low-tech economy relative to the West, where they're producing low-margin, low-tech goods and raw materials. Meanwhile, the Western nations create better, higher-tech goods and sell those at higher margins, which brings more profit, which they can invest in more R&D, more innovation, and the vicious cycle continues. This is a structural inequality that prevents other countries from catching up. The modern wonder of progress and constant economic growth is actually a modern nightmare that keeps the majority of the world's population in a perpetual state of inferiority. Isn't mankind supposed to live free? Maybe freedom is exactly the problem here. The whole purpose of endless technology and endless consumption is to give us more and more freedom. The life of inconvenience and perpetual toil of our ancestors is no more. Now we can live comfortably with all our needs, food, shelter, sex, entertainment, literally available to us at the touch of a button.
Hungry.
And if a button is too taxing, just give voice commands. But even this is not good enough. Even this is not as convenient as possible. What if chips could be implanted in the brain so that we can order the pizza with our thoughts? But then we would have to chew the food, quite a chore. What if we could just automatically inject the nutrition of the pizza into our bodies and then virtually simulate the sensations of enjoying a pizza? But then why allow a clunky body to limit our freedom in the first place? Why not technologically enhance our bodies, or better yet, ditch our bodies altogether by uploading our consciousness into the cloud so that we can exist in a state of perpetual cybernetic bliss? Isn't this the logical end of freedom? Freedom realized to its fullest potential? But of course, this freedom would also mean no more human body. And no more human body means no more soft touch of another's warm embrace. No more watching the sunset, no more smelling the rain, no more reveling in the joyous laughter of your children, no more human life as we know it, the extinction of the human race.
See, I don't know.
Well, here's the thing. I was just thinking, like, I love nostalgic-y Christmas stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I love thinking about Christmases of when I was a kid and how magical everything seemed, right? But stay with me for a sec here. But if I didn't know shit about that, I would be fine. So the problem is like a issue of sentimentality here. First of all, you can't fight the tide. Whatever's coming is coming. You know, so whatever we do become, even if it's like some collective, you know, lobster floating in space, you know, then them's tough titties. Whatever it is going to be is what it's going to be. I understand, like, you know, hey, we don't want to, let's not rush this shit. Let's think about, like, let's always think about things and be careful. Anyway, I'm going to wind up to a rant.
I think, you know, he's painting a picture here of this being like a bad thing.
Yeah.
Where we could be headed. You could also paint it as a positive thing if you wanted. He's saying no more touch. Well, you can simulate touch. You don't need to actually physically touch if you can get it in the brain, right? I think if we could see 1,000 years into the future, lest we not be stopped, or
what if they were like,
we might be like you've heard it said before, humans are the sex organs of the robots.
What if
that's where we're headed?
What if we become made of light in the future? What if they're like, compared to what's coming ahead, the love you feel of touch will feel like poison needles in your face. You know, you will not miss the smell of rain. You will not miss it because you're going to be a light of pure consciousness floating through the universe.
Yeah, I know.
You know, like, that's possible.
Yeah.
If, you know, Neil deGrasse Tyson recently, or whatever, on Joe Rogan was talking about, if humans were even 5% smarter than they are now, we wouldn't recognize them. We would be like, wouldn't even understand anything they did. Yeah. So whatever we become might be unrecognizable. Now, this is called the genius of Islam, so we're staying within the confines of religion, right? Yeah. And so we got to remember, you know, what Islam
He's
has
making
to say.
A case here for the sticking with the traditional value, which in this case would be Islam. I'm considering this is called the genius of Islam. So he's making a case for that. And he's made a good, strong case. Right.
I mean, as long as we are still here as humans, might as well take this case seriously.
So let's finish this up.
Of the human race. Is there another path?
So there you have it. We stopped it pretty much right on the end anyway.
Over the years, we've come to like agree on a lot of different things, so it's hard because maybe us arguing would be a little bit more, I don't know, something.
Interesting video. There's 2 more in this series, so I'm sure he's going to build upon this modern human condition.
Interesting. Intro.
Yeah. So. I don't know, guys. Let us know what you think about this reaction on this video. If you want us to do a reaction to the second and third parts, let us know in the comments and fill us in on what you think Daniel was getting to in this video. And if you liked it, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, share with a friend, and everybody, until next time, stay spiritual.